Right now, if you took off your glasses or contacts, you would probably be helpless within seconds. Blurry roads, blurry faces, a world reduced to shapes and colors. And yet, for over 200,000 years, humans survived with absolutely zero vision correction. No opticians, no glasses, no surgery, nothing. So here's the question that sounds simple but genuinely isn't. How did people with bad eyesight not just survive, but pass their genes down through hundreds of generations, all the way to you? The answer is stranger and more human than almost anyone expects, and by the end of this video, you're going to look at your own glasses completely differently. Let's hit into it. First, we need to kill a myth, because most people assume ancient humans had bad eyesight the same way we do today. That's actually wrong, and the truth is honestly shocking. Nearsightedness, or myopia, where distant objects turn blurry, was almost rare in early human populations. Some anthropological studies estimate myopia rates in hunter-gatherer societies at somewhere between 2 and 5%. Now compare that to today. In modern cities like Seoul and Shanghai, over 80% of young adults are myopic. Read that again, 80%. That is not a small gap. That is a full-blown epidemic, and it happened almost entirely within the last 100 years. So what changed? Scientists point to two things: sunlight and near work. Ancient humans spent nearly their entire day outdoors, hunting, walking, scanning distant horizons for danger or food. Natural sunlight triggers dopamine release in the retina, and that dopamine appears to slow down the physical elongation of the eyeball, which is the actual root cause of nearsightedness. Modern humans spend most of their daylight hours indoors, staring at objects a few inches from their face: phones, books, screens. Less sunlight, more close focus strain. Over childhood and adolescence, that combination physically reshapes the eyeball. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Bad eyesight, at this massive scale, isn't ancient at all. It's modern. We basically engineer this problem into ourselves through the way we now live. But that does not mean ancient humans had perfect vision, because there was a completely different category of vision problems that absolutely did exist back then, and that's where this story gets genuinely fascinating. Even without modern lifestyles, ancient humans still dealt with real, serious vision impairment, and it came from multiple directions at once. Genetic conditions, injuries, infections, malnutrition, cataracts, and simple aging. Cataracts are caused by protein buildup clouding the eye's lens, and they've existed for as long as humans have had eyes. Vitamin A deficiency, common during famine or poor harvests, could cause night blindness or even total permanent blindness. Eye injuries from hunting accidents, animal attacks, or tribal conflict were common. There was absolutely no surgical fix available. And then there's the condition every single human eventually faces if they simply live long enough: presbyopia, the natural stiffening of the eye's lens with age that makes it harder to focus on close objects. If you've ever watched someone hold a menu at arm's length just to read it, that's presbyopia in action. So the real question isn't whether ancient humans had vision problems, because they clearly did. The real question is this: how did a nearsighted, farsighted, or partially blind person in a hunter-gatherer band avoid getting left behind, eaten, or starved to death? And the answer isn't really about eyes at all. It's about people. Here's the biggest misconception people have about ancient survival. We picture it like a video game, one person alone against nature, and bad eyesight equals instant game over. But that is almost never how early humans actually lived. Humans are, and always have been, an extremely social species. Hunter-gatherer bands typically range from 20 to 150 people, and inside that group, survival wasn't an individual sport, it was a team sport. If your eyesight was bad, you didn't personally need to spot a predator from a mile away, because somebody else in your group did that job for you. You needed to be useful in some other way, and there were dozens of other ways to be useful. And this isn't just theory, it's backed by real archaeological evidence. In 1957, archaeologists uncovered a Neanderthal skeleton in Shanidar Cave, Iraq, now known as Shanidar 1. This individual lived roughly 45,000 years ago, and his skeleton told a brutal story. He was partially blind in one eye, had a withered, essentially useless arm, and likely suffered significant hearing loss. By every harsh survival of the fittest rule, this man should have died young. Instead, he lived into his 40s, an old age by the standards of his time. That means his community fed him, protected him, and kept him alive for years, possibly decades, despite disabilities that offered his group almost nothing in return. This wasn't an isolated case either. Paleopathologists, scientists who study ancient injuries and diseases from skeletal remains, have found multiple examples of early humans and Neanderthals surviving for extended periods with serious impairments, missing limbs, severe arthritis, total blindness. The takeaway here is enormous. Compassion and cooperation are not a modern invention. They are ancient survival technology, arguably one of the most important survival technologies our species ever developed. So if you couldn't hunt or scout because of poor vision, what did you actually do all day? Ancient societies ran on something anthropologists call division of labor, and it wasn't only about gender roles like we often hear about, it was also about ability. Someone with poor distance vision could still work brilliantly with their hands. Toolmaking, for example, is done almost entirely through touch and close-range focus, exactly the kind of task a nearsighted person might genuinely excel at, since nearsighted eyes actually see close objects clearly. Someone with poor vision could weave baskets, prepare animal hides, cook meals, tend fires, care for children, or repair shelters. They could teach. They could memorize and pass down stories, songs, and survival knowledge, an absolutely essential role in societies with no written language at all. In fact, some researchers argue that people with physical limitations may have driven some of the most important cultural roles in early human societies: storytelling, music, and spiritual leadership, roles that demanded knowledge and memory far more than physical strength or sharp eyesight. Think about it this way: a tribe isn't strong because every single member is a flawless physical specimen. A tribe is strong because it has diverse skills spread across all of its people. Bad eyesight didn't remove someone from that system. It simply moved them into a different part of it. Now, here's something that sounds almost backwards at first, but makes perfect sense once you hear it. One of the leading theories in evolutionary anthropology is called the grandmother hypothesis. It suggests that older individuals, including those with age-related vision, decline from presbyopia or early cataracts, provided a massive survival advantage to their group, not despite their age, but specifically because of it. Older members held decades of accumulated knowledge: where the water sources were during a severe drought, which plants were edible and which ones were deadly, how to treat a specific wound, how the group had survived a brutal winter years earlier. That knowledge was frequently more valuable than sharp eyesight ever could be. A grandmother who could barely spot a rabbit at 50 feet, but who remembered exactly which berries had caused sickness 20 years earlier, could single-handedly save an entire group from disaster. This is likely a major reason humans evolved to live well past their reproductive years, unlike almost every other animal on the planet. Vision decline with age didn't make elders useless. It simply shifted their role from physical contribution to informational contribution. In a world without books, without the internet, without Google, a human brain full of memories was one of the single most valuable resources a community could possess. And here's where the story becomes genuinely fascinating on a biological level. When one sense becomes impaired, the human brain doesn't just sit back and accept the loss. It compensates, aggressively. Scientists call this process cross-modal neuroplasticity, and it remains one of the most remarkable features of the human brain. Studies on blind and visually impaired individuals today consistently show enhanced abilities in hearing, touch, and even smell. The brain regions normally dedicated to processing vision get partially repurposed to boost these other senses instead. For ancient humans, this would have been an enormous survival tool. Someone with poor eyesight might develop an extraordinary sense of hearing, able to detect the snap of a twig or the rustle of grass from far greater distances than someone with perfect vision. They might notice a shift in the wind carrying a predator's scent long before anyone else even turned their head. They might develop a heightened sense of touch, allowing them to work with materials, identify plants, or navigate familiar terrain in ways others simply couldn't. In a world before technology, the human body itself was the technology, and it adapted, constantly and quietly, to whatever challenges it faced. We've all heard the phrase, survival of the fittest, but on its own, that phrase is actually kind of misleading when it comes to humans specifically. Because for early humans, fitness was never only about raw strength, speed, or perfect eyesight. It was about how well an individual fit into a cooperative group. Anthropologists sometimes call this survival of the friendliest, the idea that the most socially connected and cooperative individuals, not necessarily the physically strongest ones, were the ones most likely to pass their genes on to future generations. A person with impaired vision who was kind, skilled, knowledgeable, or socially valuable had every reason to be protected and kept alive by their community. Their genes weren't automatically erased from the gene pool just because their eyesight wasn't perfect. This is actually a huge part of why vision problems still exist across the human population today. If bad eyesight had truly been a fatal flaw throughout human history, natural selection would have wiped it out entirely generations ago. Instead, genes linked to vision impairment stuck around simply because, for most of human history, they were a death sentence at all. They were manageable, thanks almost entirely to community support. So when did humans finally start fixing eyesight directly, instead of just working around it? For nearly the entire span of human history, hundreds of thousands of years, there was no correction for poor vision whatsoever. The The first real evidence of corrective lenses doesn't appear until around the 13th century in Italy, when simple magnifying glasses mounted in basic frames started being used, primarily by monks and scholars doing close reading work. Before that, nothing at all. No glasses, no contacts, no surgery. Just community, adaptation, and the brain's remarkable ability to compensate. Which means that for over 99% of human history, the only vision correction technology available to our entire species was other people. And here's the twist that makes this whole story land completely differently. Today we live in the most vision-corrected era in all of human history. Glasses, contact lenses, laser surgery, solving eyesight has genuinely never been easier or more accessible. But paradoxically, we also have the worst natural eyesight in recorded human history. Myopia rates are climbing with nearly every new generation, especially in urbanized, screen-heavy societies. Some researchers now openly call it a myopia epidemic, projecting that by the year 2050, nearly half the entire world's population could be nearsighted. So in a strange, almost ironic loop, modern humans built incredible technology specifically to fix a vision problem that modern living itself directly created. Ancient humans, meanwhile, largely avoided that exact problem in the first place, simply by living outside, using their eyes across long distances every single day, and relying heavily on their community whenever biology genuinely didn't cooperate. So, how did ancient humans survive with bad eyesight? Not with glasses, not with surgery, not with willpower alone. They survived because they were never truly alone. Because a tribe doesn't need every single member to see perfectly, it only needs every member to contribute something. Because knowledge so often mattered more than perfect vision ever could. Because the human brain quietly rewires itself to make up for whatever the eyes physically cannot do. And because, somewhere deep in our evolutionary past, our species learned one crucial lesson, that protecting the vulnerable wasn't a weakness at all. It was one of the smartest survival strategies our species ever developed, and arguably, it's the exact same strategy that built modern civilization itself. So the next time you put on your glasses in the morning or take them off at night and watch the world dissolve into a blur, remember this. Somewhere roughly 45,000 years ago, a blind man lived a full life, protected for decades by people who genuinely owed him nothing. He didn't survive because of his own eyes. He survived because of theirs. That's not some minor footnote buried in human history. That might actually be one of the real reasons our species made it this far at all. If this completely changed how you think about human evolution, make sure to subscribe, because next time, we're diving into another survival mystery that evolution somehow solved in a way that honestly shouldn't have been possible.